There are ties that time does not erase. You've tried to forget, to distance, to silence the name that still echoes between your ribs. And yet, dreams, sensations, synchronicities, they bring this person back again and again. Is it love? Or is it memory? Is it fate? Or is it emotional captivity wrapped in the language of the soul? CarlJung once said that when we don't see our unconscious, it appears outside of us as fate. What if what pulls you is not the person, but the image they awaken in your depths? Greg Braden reminds us. The electromagnetic field of the heart records every wound as frequency. So perhaps what you feel is not them. It's your own heart playing back the last song it remembers. This thread may not be leading you outward. It might be calling you inward to find the place where your soul still waits to be met. Let's follow that thread. There are moments when the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. You no longer speak. You no longer see each other. Yet something in you still flinches at the sound of their name. It isn't love. It isn't longing. It's something deeper, a tremor in your nervous system echoing the emotions you lived when they were near. Your soul may have tried to move on, but your body still lives in that room, where the silence after their absence hurt more than any word. Jung taught us that when trauma is not made conscious, it repeats itself in symbolic ways, seeking closure. And sometimes what we call love is just a wound echoing inside the same emotional pattern. You think, if I still feel this, it must mean something divine. But perhaps it's not a message from the universe. Perhaps it's the emotional imprint of who you became in their presence. Not who you loved, but who you were while loving. It's not about them anymore. It's about the part of you that still contracts when you remember, like a bird freed from its cage, but still flinching because the memory of the bars lives in its wings. This is not weakness, it's memory, embodied, unresolved, sacred in its repetition. There's a kind of connection that doesn't feel like love. It feels like being captured. You tell yourself it must be spiritual because no one else ever affected you this way. But beneath the intensity, there's confusion, obsession, a strange resistance to healing, a loop that doesn't bring peace, only longing. What if it wasn't a sacred bond, but an archetypal possession? CarlJung often spoke of psychic inflation, when we become overwhelmed by energies larger than our conscious self. Sometimes we don't fall in love with a person, we fall into a myth, into the image they awaken within us. The twin flame narrative can become a beautiful disguise for emotional captivity. We think, no one else makes me feel like this, it must be destiny. But clarity is the true voice of the soul. Confusion is the whisper of the unconscious, trying to be seen. Spiritual recognition brings stillness. Psychic entanglement feels like drowning in a familiar sea, like the sirens of ancient myth, beautiful, irresistible, but leading us away from our own shores. If you feel more lost than found, perhaps this isn't a call to reunite, but a summons to retrieve yourself. Not all connections are made of love. Some are made of mirrors. You didn't hold on because he completed you. You held on because he reflected something broken, something unspoken, something ancient. He carried the shadow you hadn't yet faced, and in that reflection something in you both awakened and shattered. Jung taught that the shadow is not just darkness. It is everything in us that was exiled, abandoned, or unloved. Sometimes the people who wound us the deepest are those who unknowingly carry the very image of what we lack. You may have thought, if he hurt me so deeply, perhaps he's also the one who can heal me. But the truth is, he was never the medicine. He was the mirror. And sometimes the mirror that breaks us is the same one we keep holding, not because it heals, but because it reminds us of who we were in that moment. You don't miss him. You miss the part of yourself you hoped he would rescue. Like holding the sharpest piece of a shattered mirror, you bleed not out of love, but out of recognition. And even that pain carries a message. You feel them, especially in the quiet. In moments when nothing should remind you, they return. A breath, a thought, a presence that seems to visit without reason. And then comes the thought, they must be thinking of me. I can feel it. D, but what if what returns in the silence then isn't them? CarlJung revealed that what we do not express becomes autonomous within us. It seeks a voice, not outside, but from the depths of the unconscious. In silence, the psyche doesn't sleep. It amplifies. It brings forward the grief, the longing, the ache that had no space to speak. And we mistake that rising echo for a signal from the other. But echoes don't come from beyond. They rise from within. You are not hearing their voice. You are hearing the reverberation of what you never got to say. Like shouting into a canyon and mistaking the return as a response. The thread feels tighter, not because they're reaching out, but because your soul is pressing against the silence. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work, asking to be heard. Not every thread is tied to a person. Some are tied to a dream. You mourn the relationship, but what you truly grieve is the life that could have been, the mornings you never shared, the conversations that only happened in your imagination, the us that lived more vividly in the soul than in reality. Jung spoke of psychic inflation, when we invest parts of ourselves in images too large or too distant to ever be fully lived. And sometimes what we long for is not a person's return, but the return of a version of life we believed possible in their presence. The ache isn't always about who left. It's about the timeline that collapsed. The vision of future love that now drifts like fog through the corridors of memory. You tell yourself, if I could go back, everything would make sense. But what you seek isn't the person. It's the sanctuary you built around their image. Like a ghost haunting a home never inhabited, you mourn the story that never fully began. This is sacred grief, the grief of a life unlived and yet unforgettable. Some endings don't arrive with a goodbye. They dissolve in silence, in unfinished sentences, in doors left slightly ajar. You moved forward, but something inside stayed behind, watching the doorway, waiting for an echo that never returned. There are narratives that don't conclude. They loop. And in Jungian language, what remains unresolved becomes an autonomous fragment of the psyche, repeating, searching, circling. You've heard the advice, cut the cord. But this isn't a thread you can sever. It's a psychic knot, and knots don't break. They unwind slowly, through symbolic release. Your energy isn't trapped because of weakness. It's bound because a part of your story still waits to be understood. Not rewritten, not erased, just acknowledged in its full incompleteness. Like a spinning wheel caught on a broken spoke, you're not going in circles. You're returning to the point where your truth was never fully spoken. Sometimes closure isn't something you receive. It's something you create when your soul decides the silence has said enough. Longing has a pulse. It lingers not only in thought, but in the subtle rhythm of the body, in the invisible field that surrounds you when nothing else seems present. Greg Braden speaks of the electromagnetic field of the heart, a space where every intense emotional moment is recorded like an energetic signature, not metaphor, frequency. So when you feel them again, it may not be their presence, but the echo of your own heart, replaying the moment it once believed in love. You think, if I feel them this strongly, they must feel it too. But perhaps what you're sensing isn't connection, it's memory amplified. Jung reminded us, symbols carry energy when they are charged with emotion, and longing is the most persistent charge of all, especially when it was never given closure. It's like tuning into a radio station that no longer broadcasts, yet the static carries traces of a song you once knew by heart, not because it's being played again, but because your inner dial never changed. The past doesn't always visit you. Sometimes it's you who keeps returning to its signal. There is a kind of love that no longer feeds, yet we keep it lit like a sacred flame. You whisper their name in silence, not because you expect their return, but because forgetting feels like betrayal. You're not loving them anymore. You're loving the pain they once awoke in you. because it still reminds you that you were once alive. This is not madness. It's soul memory turned into a shrine. Jung spoke of the unconscious ritual, how we repeat emotional patterns to keep the psyche from fragmenting. And sometimes what we preserve isn't the person, but the suffering that gave us meaning. You say, I still love him, but love, true love, brings breath. This feels more like ash, like Ereshkigal, the goddess who chose to remain in the underworld, not because she was chained there, but because light felt like abandonment. The bond became a sanctuary of pain, a sacred space where your past still burns quietly, not to be healed, but to be remembered. And maybe part of you still kneels there, not to hold on, but to honor the echo. There are bonds that seem to defy logic, connections that persist across time, silence, and distance, threads that pull without hands, that ache without touch. But not every thread is a prophecy, not every ache is a soul sign. Sometimes the invisible thread is a mirror, a symbol, a call from the part of you that was never fully seen. Ask not only who you are tied to, but why that bond still lives within you. Is it love or is it memory? Is it presence or projection? To untie is not to destroy. To close is not to erase. The unconscious does not forget. It waits for symbols, for stories, for you to step back into what was never finished. This isn't about cutting cords. It's about reclaiming the energy you left behind in their eyes, in that moment, in that version of yourself. Some threads don't need to be broken. They need to be unwoven, gently, consciously, spiritually. Like a knot untying itself when no longer held in fear. Jung reminds us the people who affect us most deeply are often carriers of what we ourselves cannot yet see. Greg Braden teaches, the heart remembers, even when the mind forgets. So the thread you feel is not just theirs. It is your own soul calling you inward to the sacred knot still waiting to be undone. If you made it this far, write in the comments, Estoy despierta. Let others know they are not alone in what they feel, and that this pain too is part of the awakening. There is more to be seen, more to be remembered, until the next thread.